Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Selesky. I am a Qualitative Research Director at SSRS, and I am the co-chair of QUALPOR, which is AAPOR's Qualitative Research Affinity Group. Thank you all so much for being at this learning burst today on innovative methods. This is the second in a series of learning bursts that we're doing where we're having AAPOR 2025 conference presenters represent online so that folks who didn't get to see their presentations live can see them. Folks who couldn't go to the conference can see them as well. All of our presenters will speak for about 15 minutes, and we'll save 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. If you have questions for the presenter, feel free to drop them into the chat as we go along, and they'll try to get to them as they see fit. So today we're going to go Kelsey, Darby, Teresa, and we're going to go ahead and get started with Kelsey. So Kelsey Barnick is an epidemiologist too at the Health Equity Research and Evaluation Team at the Sinai Urban Health Institute. Kelsey currently supports a variety of projects focused on improving health equity using mixed methods and participatory approaches. Particularly, she is passionate about youth development and community-driven research and evaluation, both of which are highlighted in the Empower Your Voice project, which she will be discussing today. So Kelsey, if you'll go ahead and share your screen, and we'll get started.
Sounds great. Thank you, Melissa, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk a little bit more about the data walk methodology today with you all. I am going to try and go through this presentation. It was originally 18 minutes, so I'm trying to go quickly through it so that we can have enough time for everyone to speak and then present and have a Q&A. But that being said, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat. I'll try and answer them while there are other presentations going on or afterwards. So I'll be talking today about the use of the data walk methodology that we use at Sinai Urban Health Institute in the Empower Your Voice study, which is seeking to understand youth experience and perspectives in Chicago around mental health and well-being. So just to set some context and background for the significance of the work that we're doing, we know that adolescent girls are facing a growing mental health crisis. Specifically in the US in 2023, 40% of high school students experienced persistent feelings of hopelessness and sadness. Girls in particular are twice as likely to develop depression as boys, and youth in urban areas are also at greater risk of anxiety and depression. We also know that mental health in girls and adolescents directly correlates with their academic performance, physical health, and relation formation, and can have long-term impact across the lifespan. So we feel like this is a critical intervention and understanding period. Secondly, youth engagement is really essential to positive development, and participatory research is an opportunity to engage youth in that process, but it's often underutilized. So one key element of positive youth development theory is that youth really need interaction with peers and adults in a safe, supportive environment to develop skills around confidence and leadership that they'll use throughout their life. And youth participatory action research, or also known as YPAR, is an epistemology that really centers youth experience as the experts of their own lives and the things that affect them. And it's a really great opportunity to engage youth in the research process. However, even in YPAR projects, youth engagement is somewhat limited. One review of YPAR projects found that only about 1 in 10 of them actually engage youth in the analysis process. So there's a real opportunity to increase those efforts and engage youth across the scientific process. So a little bit of a background about the Empower Your Voice study. The objective of the study was to understand the factors connected to mental well-being among youth in Chicago and to develop solutions that were informed by youth and youth-centered. Our target population were female identifying youth 12 to 18 years old who live in Chicago. And we used a sequential explanatory mixed methods design. We used a survey and then followed by the data walk methodology, which is what I'll discuss for most of the time today. Our core topic areas were around mental well-being and how that interacts with social media use, exposure to violence, and trauma-related experiences. We had 2 study advisory councils that I want to highlight here because our work would not have been possible without them. We had a youth advisory council and a partner advisory council. So the youth really helped us think about our survey design, our methods, and a lot of great input about our recruitment strategies to make sure our survey didn't feel like super researchy and it felt more approachable to young people who live in the city. And so they informed a lot of our marketing and communications around like the infographic that we used to recruit youth, and also the way that we talked about the survey in our communication. So instead of saying this was a mental health research study, we talked about mental well-being and like more holistic health because of described like stigma against the words like mental health for youth who were in our advisory council. We also had a partner advisory council who helped inform a lot of our design and our methods as well. And they really contributed to some of the recommendations for practice because they have a lot of expertise in that area, as well as our dissemination efforts in making sure that the information was getting to the right people and places. So now to talk a little bit more about the data walk methodology. Data walks in general are a methodology where groups of participants, often who don't have a ton of experience working with understanding and analyzing data, are brought together and review data in like segmented stations. So there might be multiple stations around a room, there might be multiple poster boards that are reviewed together. And they engage in a process of analyzing the data, reflecting on it, and making meaning of it. So in our study, we did something similar, and I'll talk a little bit about our flow and how it looked. So we held 1 data walk in each health equity zone of Chicago, and these are regions that the city of Chicago made in response to the COVID-19 pandemic to ensure that resources were being spread equitably throughout the city. So we wanted to just make sure, you know, we followed something similar, make sure we had perspectives and experiences from throughout the city. So we held 1 in each of those zones. We had about 8 youth per session. The sessions were 2 hours long, and youth who participated were compensated and provided a meal to thank them for their contributions. We also held these data walks in partnership with some community partners. They really helped us recruit the youth who participated, and they also provided a space for us to hold these sessions, which is building upon like literature that suggests youth engagement activities are most successful when they take place in like a comfortable or safe space that the youth may have already been to in the past, as opposed to us holding one of these like at our hospital, for example. So we want to shout out our partners here, and then their zone or where the location was held is on the right. So now to talk a little bit about the flow of each session. The first part of each of the sessions started with some preliminary data from the survey being displayed to youth by topical area. And so I have an example here from our mental health and loneliness topical area. For each poster board, they looked pretty similar to this. They had between 2 to 4 indicators presented in pretty layman's terms as best as possible. We tried to remove any jargon. We tried to simplify the visuals and make, highlight words in certain colors to really to keep things simple, but also to draw the participants' attention to like the key takeaways. Then we had an adult facilitator lead each group through discussion on the relevance of each result, whether it kind of aligned with their experiences and perspectives. After that, probing questions were asked within each topical area. So, we'd ask further questions about mental health and loneliness unrelated to the specific indicators, but oftentimes the responses were sort of intertwined. And then we also importantly had multiple forms of engagement. The main form of engagement was the discussion piece where peers were interacting and asking each other questions while the adult facilitator kind of managed the conversation. But we also allowed youth to write down their thoughts and reflections on pieces of paper and provide those as well, because we know, some youth might like to engage in different ways and some may feel more comfortable writing their thoughts down rather than sharing with the group. And I think that's true across, for adults as well, but we know in youth populations specifically, multiple forms of engagement is key. So we did that as part of this study as well. And then some key findings just from our implementation of this data walk methodology. Data walks are implemented more and more, but not a lot of times in this youth setting. So we wanted to talk about like what were the key findings that we saw from the use of this method. So first, just some demographics. We ended up having older youth participate more heavily than younger youth. That may have just been due to like the nature of needing parental consent, and parents sometimes don't like to have younger youth participate in like research activities. We mostly had Black non-Latina youth participate as well as Latina youth. And then this map on the right, the orange stars are just where the data walks were held. And then the shading is the number of participants per zip code. And this is the city of Chicago. And their zones are outlined in thicker coloring. So we felt that we had pretty good representation across the city for our data walks. So we had three major takeaways. The first was that we had enriched interpretation of quantitative survey data. We had deepened discussions into the core topical areas and increased agency and empowerment of the youth who participated. So to start off, we found that our conversations uncovered nuances that weren't apparent in our original analyses. So one specific example is around cultural stigma around mental health. We learned from our data walk sessions that there's a generalized cultural stigma around mental health that has slightly reduced over the years, but there's a specific type of cultural stigma for children of immigrant parents. And one quote that one of our participants shared was, some immigrant parents, they don't believe in mental health. They don't believe that, therapy is something that can actually help you. So it was like, for me, my mom, she didn't really talk about mental health. It was this this whole thing, like, it's not that serious type of thing, but it was serious. And this really was super informative to us because we didn't look at this in our survey. We didn't ask if a participant was a child of immigrants or if what their status was either. And so we couldn't explore that. We would have never learned about this like phenomenon unless we had these data walks and we had these conversations. We also found that there is a lot more complexity to youth social media usage than our survey may make it seem, especially as youth are kind of like developing as social media algorithms have developed as well. And so the literature on it is continuing to evolve, as well as community violence exposure, which I don't have the time to get into all three of those, but I'm happy to discuss if anyone is interested or would like to learn more about what we found there. We also found deepened discussions into the core topical areas. So for example, the interactive nature of the activity allowed youth to engage in multiple forms. Like I mentioned earlier, they could both discuss, write things down, reflect on what their peers had said. The ability for youth to relate their own experiences to survey findings was really helpful and interesting. We got a lot of context about why we may have found certain things in the survey that I don't think we would have received if we didn't have youth reflecting on that information in front of our own eyes. And as well as having those probing questions allowed youth to explain some phenomena with greater complexity. Thank you. I'll just read the next quote. I'm going to skip that first quote, but this is a response from a participant who was responding to a peer who had written something down. And so they said, I agree with the sticky note that said people feel lonely even when they have people around them. I agree with that one because you can have a lot of friends and family, but they don't get you. You need somebody that gets you. And then lastly, we saw increased agency and empowerment of youth. So the youth contributions from the data walk directly informed additional analysis of quantitative data. Insights were provided through qualitative analysis of the discussions that we had, and they directly informed some of the recommendations that we made in our final report. We also asked youth about the experience of doing the data walk, and they described a lot of satisfaction with engaging in these deeper conversations about mental health and things that affect them, practicing critical thinking skills and brainstorming solutions to these challenges that impact them. And they often reported that they aren't really asked about these things, and so this was a really great space for them to work with their peers on some solutions. And I'll just read this quote from one participant. It just be feeling good that you can talk and actually people listen to you and taking what they're saying too into consideration. When you hear other people's ideas or how they think about life, it just makes you think different. And people that go through the same stuff as you, like, okay, I'm not alone. Okay, you go through it too. We can get through it. And then lastly, with my minute left, I just want to share some recommendations for future implementation. So we feel that youth research spaces are really great opportunities for girls to connect with each other, and they should be leveraged a little bit more than they are. Youth creating a safe environment and physical space that is focused around youth may help increase participation. So we had fidget spinners for the girls, we had snack breaks, we had some candy. I think really creating a comfortable space can go a long way. And most importantly is a safe emotional space as well. So recognizing this was a safe space, we weren't going to share this information back with their teachers, parents, other peers, and that their experiences were valid and that we were really trying to work with them to make sure that this research was representative of their experiences was really important to us. And lastly, empowering girls' voices by leveraging their lived experiences in the solution process and the findings process we thought was really key. We had 2 of the girls who participated in the data walks join us at a launch event panel to launch the study findings. And we thought that was a really great opportunity to have them see kind of the results of their contributions to the study. And we're continuing to look for ways to include the girls in our dissemination efforts. I just want to acknowledge our funders, our advisory councils, and of course, the girls who participated in the study, because the study would not have been possible without them. This is my contact info, and here I'll drop a link in the chat, but our full report can be found here. It has information on our findings and a little bit about our methodologies as well. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Kelsey, thank you so much. That was awesome. Next up, we have Darby Steiger. So as Darby, you're sharing your screen, I'll read your bio. Darby Steiger is Vice President of Innovation and Solutions and Director of Qualitative Research at SSRS. Darby is responsible for spearheading the advancement of the core SSRS research products while driving cutting-edge approaches to the firm's qualitative and quantitative research divisions. With over 30 years as a qualitative researcher and survey methodologist, Darby has extensive experience conducting qualitative and quantitative research for a wide range of organizations and topics.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to assume yes. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of you may have heard me give this talk at AAPOR. It is really cool research that we did preparing for the 2024 presidential debates. And I want to start by thanking colleagues at SSRS and the Washington Post for helping to pull together the research and these slides. So during the 2024 presidential campaign, undecided voters had potential to significantly influence electoral outcomes, which led to interest in studying how they would react live during the presidential debate. So there was just one debate that occurred, as many of us recall, between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And the Washington Post approached SSRS to see if we could design a methodology that would allow us to gather live qualitative reactions from a large group of undecided voters during the debates so that the Post could publish their reactions real time on their website. So we had several design goals in trying to figure out what kind of methodology to even use for this. We were looking for a platform that would allow us to be able to pose qualitative questions that would really be able to gather full participation from everybody who was taking part in the study, that would allow us not only to do those sort of in the moment questions based on what was going on in the debate, but that would also allow us to ask a short survey right after the debate ended. And that would facilitate live communication with the research team, because this was such an unknown. We didn't know what was going to happen during the debate, and we really needed that like collaborative communication during the experience. And that most importantly would allow us to download the data immediately so that the Post could be doing the live reporting that they were seeking. So we considered our traditional qualitative toolbox. And as you think about this research challenge, you know, what would you do in this situation? How would you accomplish this? So we thought, well, could we pull together a live focus group? And we're like, no, that's not a good solution. It would be too difficult to manage logistically. We would definitely not be able to get an answer from every person to every question. And we really wouldn't be able to extract the data for live publication. Way too difficult, inconvenient. We considered dial testing, which is this sort of old school model where people are like rating in the moment whether they like or don't like what the candidates are saying. But that was not qualitative. That would be quantitative. So we ruled that out. And then we also thought about maybe an asynchronous online bulletin board. But the whole point of that is that it's asynchronous and it's not live and in the moment. So we rejected that as well as too slow. So what we did was we came up with a new thing that thankfully the organization that we worked with, Sego, had just kind of come out with this new product offering that they were calling Crowd Survey. And so basically this, what we're calling a real-time event board, allowed us to customize questions in the moment, which was critical during the debate to be able to ask for reactions to the topic that had just been talked about, that required a response from every person to every question. So that meant a lot of data being generated. Had a sort of a separate add-on feature where we could pre-program the post-debate questions. So that was really critical for us. Had a whole space on it where there could be live back and forth with the research team, with the Post and SSRS communicating with each other. And importantly, offered that instant download that we needed, but also allowed us to give access to the Washington Post so that they could be downloading the data themselves and not have to wait for us to download it and then transmit it to them. So I want to kind of walk you through what this experience was like and have you kind of feel the craziness of what we went through to pull this thing off. So in preparing for debate night, who were these people that we recruited to take part in this? These were what we call deciders in a number of swing states. These were people who had been participating in an ongoing sort of tracking poll, longitudinal study of swing voters that we were doing in the months leading up to the elections. And all these people were people who were undecideds or who said they would probably vote for Harris or Trump. They had to agree to allow their first name and their photo be released on the Washington Post website and social media. So we lost a number of people because they did not want to have their identities revealed. But that was really important to the Post to make sure that these were real people that were willing to have their identities exposed. They received $100 for participating in the study. And so we screened 93 people to take part in it. 37 of them agreed to participate. Of those, 25 provided their photo and consent, and all of them showed up and completed the study. So we were real happy about that. One of the things that we had to do a little bit differently on this project than we typically do on our qualitative research studies was really have a very active communication campaign, because we were doing something we had never done before, and chances are they had never done something like this before either. And so we designed this whole like daily communication strategy with our recruited participants to really help them understand what they were agreeing to do, to get them excited about it, to make sure that they knew the basic instructions of what was going to be happening that evening, to be available for any questions that they had, and really to lay out the groundwork of like, we are here to support you. And throughout the debate night, if there are things that come up, it's the same person you've been talking to all along. He's going to help you tonight as well with that. So that communication strategy worked really well for us to really actively engage those people and get them to show up and give their full participation. This is just an example of the different styles of questioning that we did throughout the debate. So what we did beforehand was we pre-programmed some sample questions that were already available to us on the platform that we could just tailor to the topic being discussed. So we had one asking who made better arguments about topic, and then all I would have to do during the debate is replace the word topic with immigration and hit go. So these are just some examples of those types of questions that were already programmed and could just be like fill in the blank and push it. So basically the post would say, hey, pose this question about immigration. I'd tweak the word and push it out, and it would take about 10 seconds from the time they told me to ask the question until the participants saw it. We also had these on-the-spot questions, which we didn't know what was going to happen in the debate, like people talking about eating cats and dogs, which threw us for a loop. And so we had to be ready for like anything goes. So I got very well versed in the platform, and I was ready to write a brand new question if we needed it. That was not one of these pre-programmed questions. And then we had these post-debate quick poll questions that we launched afterwards. Again, those were already ready to go. I didn't have to do any programming in the moment. We could just launch the poll, and they could answer those questions. So let's take a peek into debate night itself and kind of how things rolled. So basically in the hours leading up to debate at 2:00 p.m., we sent the post an almost final list of participants. And so they were able to kind of put out on their website a preview like, hey, here are the people we're going to be talking to tonight and a little bit about them. At 4:00 p.m., that's when they launched their page introducing the participants and what would be happening throughout the debate. At 7 p.m., we finalized the list. I think we might have had a last-minute person that either dropped out or we kicked them out for some reason. I think it was this one person that didn't agree to having their photo released, or someone opted out of the session. So that was at 7 p.m. And then the debate started at 9 p.m. So at 8:30 p.m., we opened the board, and we encouraged everybody to be online by 8:45 p.m. So that they were all ready to go when the debate began. So at 8:00 p.m., we logged on. 8:30, the board opened, and we had 60% of the folks active before even 8:45 when we told them to. 8:45, the board launches. They can kind of read some introductory text. They can answer a question just to get some practice with the board. Just so you know, they had this going on either their computer or their cell phone, and they had their TV going on whatever device they were using to watch the TV. So they had to have both things kind of going simultaneously. After about 11 minutes of the debate going, we posted our first question, and then you can kind of see as we progress throughout the night, we ended up posing a total of 9 questions throughout the debate. Staggered throughout. It was not after every topic was finished, but it was based on, when the post thought that this would be a juicy topic to get some feedback on. Debate ended at 10:45. We should have posted the post-survey questions immediately, but we had a little hiccup, so those didn't go out till 11. And by 11:30, everything was done. So I'll show you in a moment what it kind of looked like on their website. But basically, the flow was the candidates would debate on a topic. We'd push out a question on the platform when they were done debating. The respondents would type in their answers to the questions. Who do you think performed better and why? We'd close out that question as soon as the last person answered it, and the Washington Post would immediately download it. They'd aggregate the answers on their end, decide what quotes they wanted to publish, and then push out those quotes. And this was what was most like incredible about this process, that the time from the question was posted on the board until they actually published it was between 15 and 25 minutes. Never in my 30 years have I done a qualitative study where it was so fast from data collection to publication. So it was pretty remarkable that we were able to do that throughout the night. Usually from this step, when we closed the question to when they published, was about 5 to 8 minutes, which is also just unbelievably remarkable on their end. We did a whole dry run. There was a lot of practicing beforehand so that they could really minimize the amount of time they needed to process through the data and get it published on their site. So this is an example of one of the live questions that we asked. So what I had to do for this one was, what they had going on their end was like live transcription. So they would take an actual quote that in this case that Harris said about Ukraine. They would copy and paste from their live transcript over into this platform. I would grab the quote, plug it into the programmed question, and hit launch. So that's kind of what happened there. And then you can see immediately the answers start coming in from the participants, both in terms of the closed-ended question of who, in this case, how much you agree or disagree with the statement, and then explaining why. And so you can see people are really giving thoughtful answers about how they felt about her response to that question. And you can also see here that we have all of their demographics kind of pre-tagged to what they said, so that it's really easy for the post to be able to sift the data and explain what conservatives thought, or liberals, or et cetera, other demographics. So this is what it looked like on their website. Some of you might have actually seen the article when it came out throughout the night, or the blogs. So in this particular question that we were just looking at, the question opened at 10:17. Everyone had typed in their answers within 6 minutes, and then the post published it 5 minutes later. And you see up here, they kind of organized everybody's answers by how they answered the closed-ended questions, and then they gave a selection of quotes. There's more than this one, but I only put 2 on here, of what people said in their reasons why they agreed or disagreed with the candidate. So this is just a slide to quickly show you that we had just incredible completion throughout the night. It wasn't just that everybody stayed on for the whole time, but almost everybody answered every single question that we asked. So the participation was just incredible. One little hiccup that we had was that some people on cell phones weren't getting the push notifications that the next question was available. So we had to reach out to them and say, hey, there's a new question, make sure you go answer it. This was the #1 most read story on the Post website, with over 5,300 comments, and the viewership and the commenting kept going until the next morning. They were thrilled about it. So lessons learned, we think it worked really well to have a single, am I out of time? 2 minutes?
Okay. 3 minutes.
Okay. To have a single point of contact communicating with our participants to keep them really engaged leading up to and during the night of the event. Really helped to prepare them in advance to know what this crazy experience was going to be like. We set up communicating with our participants through texting, through emailing, through phone calling, so that they knew, we are on top of this, and they need to be as well, and then giving them live support during the event. With the Washington Post, we had so many different channels going with them. We were on a Zoom with them. We had a Teams with them. We had within the platform communication with them. And then we had a separate Teams channel just with our team. So there was just tons of communication going on throughout the night to be successful on this. With the platform itself, really making sure we understood how to format these questions to get both the closed-ended and the open-ended feedback. We had some hiccups figuring out how to do that. We could only have one question open at a time, so we had to be very efficient with trying to figure out what we wanted to ask. As soon as you pose the next question, the previous one would close, so we had to make sure that we got everybody's answers before we pushed out the next question. And then that mobile phone issue that I shared a moment ago. The last thing was about streaming delays. So because some people were watching on a streaming platform, the debate itself was kind of hitting people at different times. So we might push out a question before they had finished hearing what the candidates had to say. So just finally, replication and potential opportunities. It went so well that we did it again for the VP debate. That went so well that we did it again for Trump's inaugural address. That one presented some new challenges because there was absolutely no format to the presidential inaugural address. We didn't know how long he was going to talk. There were no breaks. I mean, so that one was just absolutely crazy, as if this wasn't crazy enough. But because all three of those went really well, we are super interested in finding other applications for this methodology. We could see doing it during the State of the Union, press conferences, sporting events. We've already pitched it to some of our sporting clients, and live entertainment events. So as you think about it, maybe there's other applications that you could imagine using this type of methodology to get the live qualitative feedback. The last thing is that the event really needs to be scheduled far out enough in advance that you have time to recruit people, and ideally having a predictable start and end time so people know what they are agreeing to for the experience. So would love to hear any questions that you have and your thoughts on this methodology. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darby. Perfect timing. So last up, we have Teresa, who will be our third presentation, then we'll do Q&A. So Teresa Garavente is a qualitative researcher and analyst at Newman Research, also known as ANR, a full-service market research firm located in Richmond, Virginia. Teresa graduated from the University of Virginia in 2022, where she studied psychology and business administration. In her time at ANR, she's become a REVA-trained focus group moderator and has conducted over 500 in-depth interviews and focus groups. The main audiences she's worked with include Medicare beneficiaries and healthcare professionals, specializing in communications research and usability testing, both in person and online. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Melissa. So I will get right into it here. Today, I'm going to be talking you through the discovery group method and how it can elicit deeper understanding and beliefs of a research topic. And then I'll show you an example of using the discovery group method. Since AAPOR's theme this past May was all about AI, we explored participant attitudes and their experiences using AI. So the big question, what exactly is a discovery group? It's a twist on the traditional focus group method. So the way it works, once participants are recruited, we send them a pre-group assignment, and we refer to this as a workbook. Then they have a week or two to complete the assignment. And while giving homework might be a known practice, a discovery group workbook is quite extensive. It can take participants several hours across a few days to complete it. Once they complete that workbook, they bring it to the group discussion, 90-minute or 2-hour focus group, and they're walking into the room already primed on the topic. Our founder, Newman, trademarked the term discovery group, and we've been doing them at ANR for over 30 years now, so a few years before I was even born. Specifically in the healthcare and Medicare space, we have found that workbooks work very well with this older audience. You do want to tailor to your audience, so we found that paper versions of the workbook work very well for this older Medicare age audience. But of course, there's probably other software available now to do something similar, just in an online format. Thinking about when it is best to use the discovery group method. For formative and exploratory research, discovery groups are a great way to approach the front end of a qualitative into quantitative, and then end with qualitative flow of research. So having this qualitative discovery group portion first, you're able to explore the topic and then inform survey development as a later step. You'd also want to use discovery groups when you really want participants to sit with a topic for a bit, and so they can think deeply about it before they are coming to the group. And then you'd also want to use this when you're really looking for those nuanced details. So they're going to be referencing their own thoughts and opinions that they've already written down in their workbooks. So it's often easier for them than expressing a new idea or opinion on the spot. Now, on the flip side of things, things to consider when it might not be the best to use this method. So when you're looking for exploring topics where you want spontaneous reactions and you want participants to have no idea what they're walking into, of course, this method does not make sense there. Also, when you're looking for something a little bit more specific, like explicit ad testing, this also would not be the best method there. And then last, you do not want to use this method when you want something turned around very quickly. So not only do you need additional time on the front end of things for participants to have enough time to complete the workbook, but we also need a bit more time after the group as well. So we can go through the workbooks, collect the data, and analyze it as well. Now, the benefits of a discovery group. Like I said, participants are coming to the group prepared. So they are already exposed to the topic. They have gotten their ideas flowing and developed before even getting to the room. And they're already warmed up. So you're going to go beyond surface level responses. And this is also going to help them focus their thinking during the group instead of what sometimes happens when people kind of go on tangents. They know that this is the topic and this is what we'll be discussing. Participants are also going to be less susceptible to groupthink and persuasion. So they have their answers written in front of them, and they're going to be less likely to kind of just go along with what the majority of people are saying. And even if they do end up changing their opinions during the group, we have the data that they wrote down in the workbooks to kind of compare. So to see what they wrote versus what they said during the group later. And then finally, discovery groups we found can improve show rates. So these participants want to get credit for the work that they've done. So at ANR, we provide an incentive for attending the group, another incentive for completing the workbook, and then we also give an extra incentive to the winner who has the most thorough and detailed workbook. So not surprisingly, more money involved, higher likeliness for show rates. So this pre-group assignment can really incorporate any engaging activity that is not quite possible to complete during a traditional focus group setting. So a few examples, we almost always ask participants to create a collage. So this is a visual display of their thoughts, opinions of a topic, thrown together with photos, words, magazine clippings. And I'll show a couple of examples of collages in a moment. We also might ask them to document an experience. So maybe this could mean taking photos or videos and bringing that with them to the group, or maybe having a discussion with a family member or a friend, and then they kind of reflect and write about that discussion and bring that with them to the group. Also predetermined ratings. So, oops, there we go. We might ask them certain questions, scale of 1 to 5, how likely are you to do X, Y, Z? They're going to have already selected their rating prior to getting the group. Again, less likely to kind of change their answer. I also want to point out that just from the workbooks, we're getting a lot of data and it's from everyone. So it's not just hearing the loudest voices in a group, which can sometimes happen. And this workbook allows for provides us context and a voice to those who maybe are less comfortable sharing their responses in that group discussion. And just to clarify, we're getting all the data from the workbooks plus further discussion within the group that goes beyond just the questions within the workbook. I want to highlight a couple examples of collages we've gotten from past discovery group work. So this one here is a favorite collage example at our company. It is hung up in our office for everyone to see. This participant used the imagery of a Monopoly board to explain their feelings towards healthcare. And I'll zoom us in on a particular portion here. So in just this small area of their collage, we see stress about bills, confusion, a spot that says go back and find a new doctor. We have double premium. So clearly this participant went above and beyond. Not surprisingly, they were awarded with the extra incentive for most detailed collage and thorough workbook. Not everyone does something as extravagant as this, but this is a really great example of the creativity that can come from these workbooks. And one more collage example here. This was a project about Christmas trees, exploring the different stages of decorating and setting up. So each participant was asked to complete 3 collages. So within each one here, we see not just one feeling or emotion, but they're really able to articulate many different experiences within each of these collages. And then along with the collages, we typically have participants write down a few themes to explain their collage. So when we're in the group, kind of depending on time constraints, we might have a few present their collages to the group. But then the themes ensure that we understand the intended meaning of all the collages, even those who did not get the chance to present during the group. And now we'll look at our example of how we use the discovery group method. We conducted 2 in-person groups in early April using our internal recruiting database. In a typical project for a client, we would likely want to do more groups, but this was really just an example to get some preliminary data and to demonstrate the discovery group method. We segmented the 2 groups into 2 segments of those feeling more optimistic about AI, and then those who were a little bit more concerned, but we really did not find any major differences between these 2 groups. One workbook activity we gave them, we provided a large word bank of different adjectives, and we asked them to circle which top 3 they thought most strongly described AI. So we took all of their top 3 words and created this word cloud here. Of course, the larger a word, the more often it was selected. And this is a great visual that we like to provide to the client here. So discussion of these words really helped us nail down some key pros and cons of AI. In both groups, just about everyone identified both positive and negative impacts of AI. And most commonly, we heard on the pro side, time saving, entertainment, and then the inevitability of technological advancements. While on the con side, we heard lack of human touch, and then privacy and regulatory concerns. We, of course, asked participants to create a collage with this workbook as well, and the collages also really emphasize both the positive and negative impacts of AI. So this was one male participant's collage that he created, and you can see that he included a bunch of different photos here. We have a hacker right next to where it says save lives, and then we have identity theft right next to boost productivity. So he really showed a variety in his collage. And then one more collage example, just another example of how this participant kind of envisioned her collage, and she compiled these different photos from the internet into her own version of a collage. This is just a snippet of a page from the workbook. Another activity we had them do, we gave them the task of picking a topic and asking AI to explain it to them. For this, we purposely kept the instructions very vague. We wanted to see how they used AI and how they would phrase their questions and what they would be typing in. So since they did this beforehand, once they got to the group, they were ready to talk about this experience, and they could share reflective insights on this activity, which made it possible to kind of get deeper in the group discussion. It became apparent that many participants were not aware of the importance of asking a good question, and we discovered that there is strategy involved when using AI, and the typical user is not aware of best AI practices. A few participants combined the activities of creating a collage and then the task of using AI, and they did their own little experiment here. So this participant took it upon himself to use 2 different platforms, ChatGPT and Google AI, and asked each one to create a collage of photos. So we didn't ask him to do this, but this is a great example of how the workbook can give someone the freedom for exploration. You can really see how they get very engaged with these activities, kind of amplifying critical thinking, curiosity, and creativity. Towards the end of the group, we asked those who had previously participated in a traditional focus group how that experience compared to this approach, where they completed an assignment prior and they were aware of the topic. And so what we heard, they said, I had more time to think about my answers. I think I gave you better answers. And then someone said, well, this was essential for me because they had never used AI before. So for him, he said, I would have come to the group and have nothing to talk about. 3 minutes?
Teresa, 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So of course, I did not go into all of the details we found from these two groups, just gave you a quick snippet. But there's a few things we'd be considering when moving to the next quantitative phase, now that we have a bit of context on the topic. So for a subsequent survey with this particular example, we'd want to consider that respondents might not know the best practices to ask questions on AI. And then we'd also want to consider including a few questions about the respondents' background using AI. So if they have experience, what exactly does that mean? What do they typically type in? Things like that. So to wrap us up, ANR's discovery group method and our exploration of AI in this study illustrates two main points. The first is that understanding of AI varies, and this needs to be considered in all phases of research related to AI. And the discovery group method is very beneficial when diving into a new topic from that exploratory standpoint and when using as a first step in order to inform survey writing. So that is everything, and I look forward to questions, but my email is here if you'd like to contact me there.
Amazing. Thank you. Teresa, if you will stop sharing, perfect, and have my two other speakers come on camera. Just to stay organized, because we have a big group of folks, if you use the raise hand function, we're open for questions for any of our speakers. There's no questions. Okay, let's have Dana and then Annie. I'm reading this in the wrong order.
Okay, I think, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I do.
All right. First of all, those were all fantastic presentations and so thought-provoking. And I'm wondering specifically for Darby and Teresa, your participants are obviously so involved in like many hours of work. I'm just wondering how you conceptualized incentives and compensation for their time.
I'll start with that. So these were survey respondents that were getting paid, I think, about $5 to respond to a 15, 20-minute survey a couple times during the election cycle. So we wanted to give them enough money that it felt like a good, investment of their time, but not like overdo it. So we were asking them to watch, about a 2-hour, 45-minute debate. An hour and 45-minute debate. So we just thought about, okay, what would we normally pay for an hour and a half long focus group? We might pay $100 to $150 maybe for a 90-minute focus group for people that we were just asking to do a focus group. But these were already engaged people in answering surveys and not getting very much for the survey. So 100 felt like kind of that right amount where it sounded like a lot of money for them, but not too much or too little. So it's like a little bit of the context behind how we ended up on that.
And then for the discovery groups, we definitely give extra incentives. So I think for both the group and the workbook combined, we gave $200 for a 90-minute group, and then we gave that extra $100 for one person in each group who had the most detailed workbook.
Annie.
Definitely 3 amazing presentations. I thought these are totally different ways to think about research. My question's for Darby. So as you were gaining this information from these respondents, did you feel like obviously you achieved what the post was asking for, this like instant reaction, the engagement? I feel like the exercise itself was so successful just in itself to like be able to do that logistically. But do you feel like then the insights you gained were sort of applicable, or like what did we learn about the election because we had these responses? Like, did you feel like it was good quality and something that would be sort of usable I'm not sure how to ask that question, but I think how would you be able to apply that data kind of in terms of what you thought was going to happen for the election type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was really about like, were people swayable, right? Is something that they heard in the debate enough to make them switch from being undecided to leaning, or from considering one candidate to saying, oh, no, I'm going to go to the other candidate. And so we did see some of that movement with people from what we had learned beforehand, what they were saying during the debate. Like, it wasn't always that people who said probably Trump were always liking what he said, or people who liked, like, so people were really honest and they didn't stick to their guns. And their guns were, tended to be undecided. So there was like one or two people that crossed over. Now, I don't know how they ultimately voted at the end of the day. We didn't track that. I don't think we went back to them afterwards. But just knowing that we learned that people were persuadable from what they heard in the debate, I think was a huge learning, right? You always wonder that, like, is anybody actually changing their mind when they listen to these debates? And we found that actually some people are, like, it matters. So, yeah.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
John.
And
yeah, love the questions, love the answers, love the presentations. They're all great. Good job, gals. On the last one, I have focus groups coming up in mid-November, 2 groups, one night, and I have already decided that I'm going to, in the screener or maybe in the tech check, have them, it's about a water district, and have one group be told, okay, think about where you get your water and water district and water things and that sort of thing. Don't know exactly how I'll say it. And the other half I won't. And see if I get any different responses, because I think I've always shied away from telling folks what the topic is about, or at least maybe in very general terms. But you're saying, no, go and tell them everything that it's about or what it's about. So they're coming with some preconceived ideas and get their thoughts together. I've never tried that, so I'm going to do it in a scientific way.
Yeah, I like it. It's definitely works for particular topics, but like I said, the couple people who had never used AI, this was really key for them because they would have come to the group and probably had very little to share on the topic.
Any other questions in our last minute? Let's have Kelsey, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. These were amazing presentations and just really, really great session. Kelsey, any takeaways, like do this differently? And I'm also interested, in terms of like parental consent and getting parental consent to allow, just to to participate in this in a regular discussion, but if there's anything different about getting parental consent in this kind of more active engaging with the data type of interaction.
Yes, I think we had some learnings on how to do it differently, but overall we felt like the implementation was pretty successful. Parental consent was tricky. So for our survey, we actually had our IRB waived parental consent because there's a lot of literature saying that youth will not respond honestly on a survey if they think their parent is going to see the answers, even if their parent isn't going to. So we were able to have that waived, but for the data walks, we were not able to have that waived because it's around mental health and it's a serious topic. So I think that is why we had an older population participate. Like we had more of those 15 to 18-year-olds. So I think in the future, if there's a way for us to, engage with the parents a little bit more and explain, or I think that would be helpful. But we never had any situations where we didn't get enough youth to participate. And that was largely due to the fact that we partnered with those community organizations who did work with the parents already. So we kind of had like a liaison. And I don't think we would have been successful if we didn't have that.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming today. Thank you so much to our presenters. We will have this recording up on the QUALPOR webpage, hopefully within the next week. And please join us next week for our November Learning Burst. We're doing them sort of back to back. on qual and AI. So thank you to our presenters. Thanks for coming and have a great day.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, everyone.